Welcome, 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 everyone across the state Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and around the world. This is our Revolution Pennsylvania. This is our September event. Happy Labor Day weekend. Let us remember during this Labor Day weekend what Labor Day is actually about. The labor movement, the union movement, the rights of workers, the protections of workers throughout this country, and the way that those workers built this country. Our guest today is Dr. Nadia, Ahmad, and we will be speaking about the labor movement. She is the interim president of the National Organization for Women, the Pennsylvania chapter. We're waiting for her to dial in right now. It wouldn't be human, and it wouldn't be Zoom, and it wouldn't be a weekend if we didn't have a little bit of, dial-in linky issues. So we're getting through that. I am Jeff Kennedy. I am the host and presenter of The Kennedy Effect, the global progressive interactive radio program based right here in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. I am with my partner and dear, we'll say dear, Kristen Volchansky. Hal Ginsberg is here from the National Our Revolution, and I think this is an excellent time to introduce Hal and let him speak to you a couple minutes about Our Revolution, the national organization. Hal, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Jeff. Great to hear from you, but not see you. For some reason, I wasn't seeing you on my screen. I was watching Kristen, but we will be showing Nadia Ahmad as soon as we get her on. She's the interim president of NOW. And why are we doing a program on Labor Day weekend? Well, this is a really important program when it comes to Labor Day. We're talking about the critical role, the crucial role that women have played and continue to play in the labor movement. So we are going to be talking with Nadia Ahmad from NOW, the interim president in Pennsylvania of that organization. I do want to just give you folks real quick an update on, and there I am, you can see me twice, an update on what we're doing nationally. And you can see there at the bottom of your screen there, if you're on Facebook, we do want you to become a Pennsylvania movement builder if you can. ourrev.us/PAMEM, ourrev.us/PAMEM. And just for $5 a month, you get a nice card. In fact, I think we're right now in our Bernie poster giveaway phase. So if you join now with that $5 a month contribution, you actually get a nice Bernie poster. There it is. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend too much time chattering away, but do want to let you know about that great opportunity to get that really nice Bernie poster. So we are fighting to pass that reconciliation budget, and Pennsylvania is kind of ground zero. We'll talk just briefly about that. We've got about a month to go, and the reconciliation $3.5 trillion with a T, $trillion bill includes some really important provisions that Democrats with just a bare majority in both houses can pass through reconciliation. That includes vision, dental, and hearing. If you're a senior, you know how tough it is. Those hearing aids alone can be $3,000-$4,000 if the first one works. It can be twice or thrice that if it doesn't. So this is a really important provision. It looks like we may get negotiating with Big Pharma. Medicare could actually greatly reduce the expenses that we all pay through our taxes to guarantee seniors at least a modicum of health care coverage through retirement. And we are looking now at likely negotiations with Big Pharma. That'll save a lot of money. We also are fighting hard to end fossil fuel subsidies and to protect the rights of labor. There we are down in South Carolina. That's my group. And you can see Congressmember Jim Clyburn. He's the majority whip. He was not happy, and he really didn't have to get all upset because we weren't about confronting him, arguing with him, fighting with him. We're about, hey, Democrats, we're with you as long as you're with us. He didn't see it that way, sadly. We are working in Pennsylvania. Kristen has already reached out on a number of occasions to U.S. Senator Bob Casey. He is important because he is considered a moderate. His voice has resonance in the moderate Senate community. And he is definitely moving on this issue, but we want to keep him there. So this Tuesday, just the one day after Labor Day, at 11:30, Pinky is going to be leading a group there. We've got about 15 signups. We want to get 20, 30, 40 people there. OurRev.us/Scranton. Tell Senator Bob Casey, expand Medicare, protect workers' rights, end fossil fuel subsidies. Bob Casey, just real quick, has always touted union support. So, Bob, if you're going to ask for and receive support from working people in Pennsylvania, then you need to stand with them and support that $3.5 trillion budget, including protections for labor and, of course, ending fossil fuel subsidies and expanding Medicare. And then we've got another rally in Philadelphia, and it says ourrev.us/PAMEM. That is a mistake. That's on me. That should be ourrev.us/Philly, right? So it's ourrev.us/Scranton. And then if you're going to go to the Philly rally on Wednesday, just put Philly where it says PAMEM. You can go to PAMEM to contribute, but Philly is where you'll get to RSVP for our Philadelphia rally. And then we've got a phone bank coming up. At some point, I'll get a link in the chat for that. I hope to anyway, where we're calling those House leaders. Listen, that's enough from me. Let me turn it right back to Jeff and Kristen. Guys, thank you so much for doing this really important rally meeting today.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Where are we? Are we ready to keep going?
We're ready to keep
going. Go for it.
Hi, so I'm Kristen Wolchansky. I am one of the organizers for Our Revolution PA. And thank you so much to all of you who are joining us on this lovely Saturday morning on Labor Day weekend. And so why are we here? We're here because it's Labor Day weekend, and we thought we would do something interesting. Labor Day often kind of has a very masculine feel. We celebrate steelworkers. Jeff and I are 10 minutes away from the Bethlehem Steel plant.
What remains of the Bethlehem Steel plant.
And this weekend we'll probably head down there. But the labor movement has also always had women in it, and it's always been shaped by women. And as kind of an intro to our very esteemed guest who's with us today, I just thought that I would bring up a little bit of a story of the labor movement that I think doesn't get enough attention, and that is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire and the strike that preceded it, that was led by mostly teenage girls who were immigrants, many of them who didn't speak English, who worked in garment factories in New York City. And they walked out and went on strike months before that fire because of the conditions that they were working in, that they did not have fire precautions, they were locked in the buildings, they had no rights as workers, and their strike picked up steam, and they actually had wealthy young women who came out and went on strike with them. But sadly, their strike was not successful. And several months later, there was this tragic fire at a garment factory. Many of the young girls were locked in the building. There were no water pails in their workspaces, and there were few fire exits. Many of them perished in that fire. And the investigation later would lead to the establishment in New York State of a safety commission, and Frances Perkins was on that commission. If you are a history buff like me, Frances Perkins might sound familiar. She went on to be FDR's labor secretary, and she was instrumental in passing a lot of the provisions of the New Deal and progressive reforms around labor. And so I bring that up because I think that is kind of a fitting way to introduce our guest. Our guest today is Nina Ahmad. Dr. Ahmad is the interim president of the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Organization of Women. The National Organization of Women is the largest women's rights group, grassroots group in the United States. It was founded in 1966. And Dr. Ahmad has had a esteemed and remarkable career. As a child, she and her family fled from Bangladesh and came to the United States. She worked her way through school and put herself through the University of Philadelphia. She earned a PhD in chemistry. She is a molecular scientist. She has also been a small business owner. She has served on a national board for the National Organization of Women, and she continues to serve on that board. She was also the president of the Philadelphia chapter of the National Organization of Women. She served in the administration of Mayor Kenney. She was instrumental in establishing Philadelphia's Commission on Women. And she also helped to push several other reforms and progressive policies through that organization in that position. And she also served in former President Barack Obama's administration on an advisory board for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And this past cycle, she ran for Auditor General. And I can say that I sincerely hope that she will consider running for something again. And with that, we would like to welcome Dr. Ahmad and open the floor to you, Nina, to be able to offer some opening remarks about your work and what you're working on at the National Organization of Women.
Thank you so much for that. Such kind introduction, Kristen. I think because, I don't know if you can see me, but let me see the standard. Yeah, I will open my video. It's great to be here, and thank you for having me and, hearing a little bit about the National Organization for Women. I just wanted to correct that because we do have men and others in our organization who don't identify as women. So I just want to make that clear. It is the National Organization for Women, not of women. I would like to share the screen if possible so that I can just walk you through some slides and very informal. So let's see. Am I allowed to share the screen now?
You are.
Okay, wonderful. Let's see. Okay. Right. I am seeing all kinds of, you cannot share screen while other participant is sharing is the message I get.
I think, Kristen, you were sharing yours, but if now you should be able to, Ms. Ahmad.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Sure. Okay, and all right, everybody can see the screen? All right, thank you so much. So as I said, I am the interim chair of the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Organization for Women. And just a little brief background, even though Christian gave you a little idea of who we are. We are the grassroots arm of the women's movement. And very uniquely, we are a multi-issue and multi-strategy organization. Many of the women's groups you might find have a single issue that they work on. And this is why we are a grassroots organization, and we'll talk about what those issues are. And we are in all 50 chapters and the District of Columbia, and hopefully that will be a state soon. With representation, not state, but with the congressional representation. And let's see, and we have taken action since our inception through intersectional grassroots activism. And we're gonna get to what that really means and how we do that. And basically promoting feminist ideals and making sure that we have equal rights, and really more than just equal rights, equity, because we all come from different places in all aspects of social, political, and economic life. Okay, let's see, how do I go to the next slide? Here we go, I got it. Pennsylvania chapter is also a statewide grassroots nonprofit, and we have different parts to now here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And it's a volunteer organization. This is all a labor of love. And we have over 13,000 contributing members. We're actually a little lower than that. We are, which is why I am haven't taken over Pennsylvania now. we have to revitalize and get all our chapters going again. And that's part of the work that I am doing with the team just now. And we're going to be having elections soon, which we're going to run as a slate, and hopefully we will be elected, but there'll be other people who might participate. The 6 core missions we are involved in are economic justice, reproductive rights and justice, LGBTQIA plus rights, racial justice, ending rape culture and violence against women, and constitutional equality. So this is just to give you a little framework. And why is it important for an organization like this, I think, to be in the midst of what's happening in Pennsylvania, is that we really have a role in enhancing transparency and good governance, contributing to the increased public debate on priorities. And this is where that intersectional lens comes in of where is our budget going, having transparency about public revenues to really engage to see are those dollars that are tax dollars going to the places they need to, and we help shepherd that to some extent, and sometimes are a pain in the side of folks who just make those decisions. And having been on both sides of that equation, I can tell you, it is really important to do what all of you are doing, to keep pushing, to keep asking, to keep engaging. This is the interim team. So 2 of our team come from the Coalition of Labor Union Women, Jeanette and Janet. And Louise, actually, we are losing our treasurer. She has moved to another state, so she's still participating, and I will be handing over this charge. So let's see. Hold on one second. I am having a little trouble finding my next. There we go. So we also have a PAC, and we believe that women's votes will decide the future. And we are determined to elect a majority of people who are committed to the advancement of women's rights on all levels of political office. And as I said, we are for women, we endorse men, but if everything is equal, if you have multiple candidates, we try to endorse women or people who identify as women. And we, more than raising money, we ask for direct contributions to their campaigns. And we also make sure that we put out the word on that. And just to remind all of you, we have an election, very important election coming up in November. And these are our endorsed candidates. Our top are the statewide. We, generally speaking, endorse Democrats because of their platforms of choice is a really important criteria. And so we usually don't see Republicans. I don't know in the history if they have ever done that, but because of platforms, we, generally speaking, endorse Democrats, but we are open to endorsing others as well if they have aligned with our values. So coming up, we have very important statewide elections, as well as obviously everybody's having elections across the board, but we have the ability to probably get another Supreme Court seat. We have a Superior Court candidate, Judge Tamika Lane, and then 2 Commonwealth candidates, Judge Dumas and Judge Spurgeon. We are seeing that courts matter, right? You have seen what has happened in our country just recently. And so it's very, very important we have turnout. This is how we win our elections. We have, a larger number of Democrats registered than Republicans, but we also have to match the enthusiasm and make sure there's turnout. I'm from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia, because it has a almost 7-to-1 ratio of Dems to Republicans, think that the election is the primary election and then forget to come out to vote in the general. And in this case, we want to make sure that particularly in these judicial races, that Philadelphia turns out big time, and we can really dampen the Trump votes that are, very much prevalent in Pennsylvania. I know that personally, having been the primary Democratic nominee, but then not being able to make it in the general, where we had a lot of problems down ballot. And, Kristen herself was working on a campaign. There was many of us who did not, number one, get support in a coordinated campaign. I think that was a problem. But my biggest problem, I was outspent 2.5 times by my Republican candidate running against me. And they had a very savvy, coordinated campaign. And they knew how to turn out their folks. And because we didn't have straight ticket voting, which we had given away to get mail-in voting, we suffered from that as well. People just did not feel they needed to go down the ballot after presidential to do any more voting. So these are all places where organizations like yours can really inform and educate folks, and really put out very starkly what is at stake. So as you know, that we just had a terrible, terrible time in Texas. The Supreme Court decided not to take on the lawsuits that wanted to put an injunction on the SB 8, which basically allows vigilantism to prosper in Texas and to go after women. And they stopped abortions after 6 weeks, where you actually don't even know if you're pregnant, right? I'm not going to, go over every last detail of what's happening, there, but needless to say, it is an awful, awful situation, and we're all scrambling. The Republicans have had 40 years. They've been working since Roe v. Wade to have strategy, and I think the other side, that means us, we did not. We did not have a coordinated strategy, knowing that this would be on the chopping block every chance that they had. And here we are today, scrambling to figure out. So being strategic is, and having an overview of more than just one election cycle is critical. I just wanted to highlight a few things we have done as now. I don't know if some folks who are maybe from Philadelphia might remember what is called Corngate. We had these ADAs who had come from the State Attorney General's office and were employed in Philadelphia, who were part of this disgusting Corngate, where they were using state-issued computers to pass servers to pass disgusting material. And this is a quote that was in one of the newspapers from us, that this gross misconduct points to a culture of misogyny and racism that permeates the highest levels of government. They were judges on that ring, they were prosecutors, defense attorneys, you name it, and people were passing this filth around. The problem was that these ADAs in the district attorney's office, that time it was Seth Williams, who was the district attorney for us, were in charge of deciding whether they were going to prosecute something that came to them as a rape case or not. So they had a lot of power in shaping women's lives. And here they were thinking so little of women, people of color, LGBTQA folks, and anybody who was not a straight white man. We actually were the first people to sound the alarm, and we got our city council women to stand with us. The press obviously paid attention when we got them in the game, and we had to be very persistent. The district attorney, whom I know personally, we had reached out. We said, you have 3 daughters. What are you doing? Why do you have these people in these positions? And so on and on it went. And I can just say by 2016, not only was the district attorney gone, all the 3 ADAs were gone as well. But it took a lot of doing to get this picture you see here. It took a lot of doing to get them to stand with us, because anybody who has a political career is always nervous about taking on another politician. So anyhow, we not only got our local city council, we brought this to the attention and got attention from state elected officials. So it had a life of its own, and we're very proud that we were spurring this. And we also had a petition going around so that anybody who came for our endorsement would have to publicly sign that petition, agreeing with our demands. So that was gave a lot of heartburn to a lot of people, because they didn't want to be identified with doing something radical. We have stood very firm with Governor Wolf, who has been a stalwart ally in our fight for reproductive freedom and justice. He thankfully is going to be using his veto pen. And I'll go back to the slide where we had the kinds of legislation that the Pennsylvania legislature has been pushing on us. Let's see if we can go back. Yeah, so here we are. These are some of the things on the books, shaming women and driving up costs of reproductive health care, requiring a ritual burial of ectopic pregnancies, zygotes, blastocysts, and embryos. These are just clumps of cells. This is outrageous. And then women who've had miscarriages, not elective abortions, are required to do this as well. And then there's a HB 1500, which would install barriers between a physician and a patient. This decision whether or not to continue with pregnancy is with your physician. That's the only person you consult with. But the decision is yours, what you want to do with your body. Thankfully, we have Rep. Frankel from the West, who introduced a Protection of Patient Trust Act, which would ensure that medical providers would not be forced to provide inaccurate information. In this day and age of misinformation and disinformation, it is critical we have allies who understand this and help protect our right to control our own bodies. So we've also been involved, just a sample of a few things we've done, involved in moving forward on racial equity. And in the end of last year, we had a conversation about, a town hall really on the national picture on racial equity and reparations in our country. And really talking about HB 40, which keeps getting introduced. And finally, I think now we'll be able to move forward on that. It's a commission. It's just a commission to study and develop reparation proposals. And it's called the African Americans Act. And it has been a long time coming. And I think we had a very robust conversation. And we also had the amazing Michael Ford. I don't know if people know him. He's a defense attorney, a civil rights attorney who is just amazing and has a deep knowledge of history. We also had the Action Center for Race and Economy with us. So we had a well-rounded panel, and we're going to follow up and do some more. And our focus, my participation in that panel, was really to talk about the deep cost Black women bore during the time they were enslaved, because their bodies were used as incubators to create more enslaved people. And there's a massive price for that, and that has to be factored in. And a lot of times reparations are talked about in only the economic perspective, without understanding this huge, deep pain that still persists in our society as how we treat Black women. So, and then here's another sample of us really driving issues. And this was, reaching out to the First Judicial District about racism in our courts. And this was a report had been issued. It was called the Cure Report, which really talked about nepotism and racial tension. And the First Judicial District chose not to release it. I waited a whole year. And the egregious parts of it was there were Black women judges who were being harassed, and there was one who got a message: there will never be a Black ex running a court. You won't be president judge. Keep municipal court great. These were, people within judicial system sending it to their colleagues, and here they were not willing to move on this. So what we do sometimes is amplify these issues, bring it into public attention. And I'm told that Vanessa Fields, who had written this letter, who's the president of Philadelphia now, who I work with very closely, was her letter really spurred them to have a hearing on this. And Councilman Kenyatta Johnson actually convened that. And this is the entire cure letter, so we will not. And then the COVID pandemic. Oh my goodness, all of you are feeling the brunt of it, and you have seen the debacle unfold in Philadelphia and the public health department in how they've dealt with it. They had given a contract to a 21-year-old white man with no experience, no medical background, as opposed to a Black woman who is a pediatric surgeon with many, many years of experience, who started an organization, a COVID consortium of Black doctors, and they chose him over her to give them actually, it wasn't even a contract, it was just a conversation where they were giving them full rein to do a work that they had no business doing. A lot of brouhaha. At the end of the day, the public health commissioner resigned. I was fired, and not when this happened. By the way, it happened because of how he dealt with remains of the MOVE debacle. And I've been disappointed in my former boss in what is going on in Philadelphia. So anyway, we wrote this scathing letter. We had a petition going, and we've also, talking about Labor Day coming up and the introduction Kristen gave, we have been very much front and center in making sure not the labor movement knows what women have brought to the labor movement, and really advocate on behalf of working women. This was actually doing a testimony for a bill that Helen Gim was sponsoring, and I think there were other sponsors, Quinones Sanchez, Greenlee, Backwell, a lot of them. But and this was really about a fair working week. What does that look like? Making sure that people had advance notice on how to plan their lives, not at the spur of the moment scheduling and at the mercy of who owned or ran the company. And finally, just a last couple of slides about what happened in Texas really underscores the need for us. And this is nationally, we are working on this along with other groups to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, really. It is very simply that no one shall be denied or abridged anything by the United States on account of sex. And the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. And this amendment shall take 2 years after the date of ratification. So we got the 3/4. It took a long time, 3/4 of the Congress to join in on this. Now there's a whole debate on the rules of whether the archivist puts this in our Constitution. But it's a fight now that takes on a different perspective, because the pregnant people's bodily autonomy really would form a core basis for legal precedent established with this ratification. And this is why they're working so hard to deny us the ERA. In the light of what has happened, we're all innovating. And now, just recently, a new study came out showing that online abortion services are safe and effective. So telemedicine for abortion in places like Texas. I know the legislature there is so deeply cruel. Now they're trying to say you can't, buy this by mail. They're going to be trying to push that legislation forward. So it's like a whack-a-mole. It's constant, and we have to be very strategic about how we do this. This is not just about getting an abortion. This is really about having your bodies under your own control or somebody else's control, which is really about more than just your body. It is really about controlling your destiny and who is in charge of that. And that's why it's critical we have everybody involved, all our allies involved, to understand what this really means for over half the population of the world, really, not just us here. So allow me this being a little crude. Why do people have abortions? Not really. The 22% should be the entire circle. Excuse my French, fuck off. So that's really essentially what we're saying. I'll just segue now into what Kristen mentioned about the conditions, working conditions for women. And, in 1911, we had the shirtwaist factory fire. In 2013, and we're talking with a global perspective, I come from the country of Bangladesh, where women have literally saved the country after they had liberation and were left with nothing when they, got the chains of oppression off of them. And their economy was built with the garment industry, which is basically peopled by women. And in 2013, there was a horrific fire in one of these buildings. And this was a protest on the anniversary of this picture, and where the building collapsed and hundreds of people died, mostly women. And, basically this is a site of the building. It was supposed to be built to 6 floors. It was built illegally to 8 floors and no exits. And here's a picture of a young woman who lost her legs because somebody decided to try to make some more money on her back, basically on her legs. So I put this on because this is a global issue. Women's rights is a global issue. And a lot of what happens in this country sets the platform for how things are going to progress overall in the entire globe. So we have a huge responsibility in order to make sure that we create these freedoms here, which means the rest of the world can use us as a template. And that's why it's so important. We keep working to make sure, working conditions for women are safe, not just safe, but lots of other issues, which we'll just talk in a minute. And so, this brings us to what is intersectionality. That's a term that's thrown around, but it starts with a quote here from Audre Lorde, who made an observation that we all know to be true. There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And that's really the basis of what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw used to coin the term, which is really a concept to describe ways in which oppressive institutions such as racism, sexism, homophobia, and other oppressive institutions are interconnected, and you can't examine them separately from one another. And that's really the crux of the matter, that you can't just be a single issue about economic parity without talking about the other issues that impact that. When feminism does not explicitly oppose racism, and when the anti-racism work does not incorporate opposition to patriarchy, race and gender politics often end up being antagonistic to each other, and all of us lose. And that's what we saw in the women's movement. We just celebrated the 19th Amendment. Black and brown women were left out, even though they did the work of getting that amendment passed. So these are, a white supremacy is a founding principle of this country. And to fight against it, we really have to be extremely intersectional in our approach. So just some facts about the labor market. Many of you might know this already. Latinas earn 54 cents, Native women 57, Black women 62, white women 79, Asian women 90 cents. And now this is a really important statistic because it bears unpacking. Asian women tend to earn the highest wages, but when you disaggregate the data, there's a much larger pay gap than even others. So for example, women of Nepalese descent earn 50 cents. Cambodian American women earn 57 cents to every dollar by white men. So when we see data like that, it masks these stats. And so we really need to be very disaggregated in our approach to looking at these numbers. And these are the kinds of low-wage jobs that are held by women of color. Manicurists, housekeeping, agricultural work, skincare. And as you go up the chain, you have medical assistants. Part of the reason you have the Asian American number so high is a lot of them are in the nursing industry, and it's a lot of immigrant labor that's there. And that edges up the numbers there. But again, as I said, disaggregation is really critical. And so, as Kristen pointed out, women have played a significant role in the early industrial revolution, in the labor movement. And however, there was a lot of bias. And even though they were capable, they were not looked upon favorably by men, and particularly during times of high unemployment, because resources were scarce, of course. For example, the International Typographical Union was the first union to admit women, but they couldn't get apprenticeships to actually become printers. So here the capability was proven, but you couldn't get the job, right? And a lot of reasons why union movements limit women's participation is because women's wages are a lot lower than men's. We just talked about that. That was true then, that is true today. Union dues are too high for women to afford. When you are working in a low-wage job with horrible minimum wage that we have, it's impossible to live on it, let alone participate in other organizations. And women who performed and still do most of the housework, childcare, it's very difficult to participate in things that take you away from your job in the evening, which is your childcare and house care. And we have to be thoughtful about those things in how we shape access to our unions. And so, with this COVID pandemic, we have really come to understand all these underlying reasons why some communities have been hit more than others. And however, labor unions are at support for labor unions at a 50-year high. And this is a really important moment in time that we could use for grassroots organizing to make unionization much more widespread, because we know that is the path to a just and fair working condition, but also a just and fair life. So the important piece to remember is not to make the same mistakes, that an injury to one is not felt the same by all. And this has been a failure of the US liberation and labor movements to acknowledge this fact. And, we talked about intersectionality, and we have to really, really keep that in mind when we're doing this. And we must commit it to the explicit and hard work of challenging this colorblind way of doing things and just class-centered organizing frameworks. We have to replace them with new solidarities and collective visions that don't erase the interclass inequity. We need to keep that along with all these other factors. So real class situations of people who are not just raceless, sexless workers, but for whom racial and sexual oppression are significant determinants in their working and economic lives. We have to remember that. This is not identity politics. So far, it has been the white man's identity politics, which has been the default setting in this country. We have to change that. And so, as we know, in this pandemic, the Black and Latino, Latinx workers have been disproportionately laid off. They have been at the front. They have been frontline essential workers. The gender gap has exacerbated that problem. And so I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but we have to keep in mind how we dismantle these systems that continue these oppressions. And so the new normal must be fair to all. And this pandemic has really laid bare the structural inequities that shape our lives. This also allows us a big reset moment, right? And to rebuild our society that offers justice and safety for all. So let's not, go back to business as usual. And finally, nobody's free until everybody's free. And I think we need to keep remembering that every public policy, everything needs to be seen through those intersectional lens. And I wish all of you a very happy Labor Day. Hope you're not working on Labor Day. Many people will be working on Labor Day. And I hope we can work to have not just a country, but a world. Whereas Fannie Lou Hamer said, we remember that nobody's free until everybody's free. So I am done, and I will stop sharing and be back here. So thanks for being so patient and listening to me go on and on, but this is a labor of love for me, having really felt what it means to be marginalized, because I lived through the war of independence that created the country of Bangladesh. I was a young girl then, and 3 million people died fighting for freedom so that I could live. And 250,000 women and girls were brutalized as a tool of war. So we have a lot of work to do, because that's still happening in the world across the way. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Nadia. That was wonderful. And we have a lot of questions in the chat and a lot of people asking something along this similar lines, which gets to the core of what you talked about a little bit, how vital intersectionality is. And several of our guests have asked something along a similar vein of inquiry, which is, why do you think it has been such an obstacle to incorporate that kind of intersectionality into the women's movement, and why so many women actually have kind of pushed back against feminism, do not want to be associated with feminism or defined as a feminist?
Right, exactly. Because of being left out and their whole lives not being taken into account. People have said, you're not really seeing me when you have this brand of feminism, right? So that's one issue. It's all about giving up space, right? So it is all about saying, if I give you and I see you in your entirety, it makes me lesser, instead of saying we're expanding the pie. People think it's a shrinking pie. And same thing, as I said, during times of unemployment, women are impacted more because men don't want others to come in and take the scarce jobs that they are. So it really is a paradigm shift in saying that, how do we increase the pie rather than taking scraps? So when we are able to do that at the same time as doing using intersectional lens to do that, I think we're going to see a change. I think right now, the National Organization of Women, in the very inception, had a Black woman vice president. And then right now, today, after so many years, it's a 55th year anniversary, we have a Black woman leading now, a younger Black woman leading now. That did not come about easily. We actually, I'm termed as one of the radical 9 who caused the previous woman who was leading it, a white woman, to be removed, and to have this Black woman come in, who now needs support to make sure that she can succeed, because there are a lot, as I said, there's a lot of reasons that people don't want to give access and power. It's really about power sharing and who's driving the conversation and who's setting the agenda. And it's not easy to share. When you've had a default setting of so many 400 years of saying you are just better. A child is born in this country and immediately, without anybody saying a word, understands who's more powerful based on race. It's just visually, you see what's going on. So in order to unpack that, you have to really look at what structural racism looks like. We can have single payer and we can still not have equity in healthcare because you have racist doctors. If you don't build that into what single payer looks like, you're not going to go that extra mile to make sure that we're looking at maternal mortality. Why 3 times Black women die than white women? It's purely racism, nothing else. It is saying that you're less than, so you don't need to get my full attention and care. This is happening whether you're a rich Black woman or a poor Black woman, it doesn't matter. So when we dismantle these structures of inequity, we have to look through those intersectional lens, or else we're going to miss out and we're not going to have systems that take everybody into account.
And to your point, you mentioned that your organization has just elected a new national president and vice president, and that the president is a younger woman. We have a perennial problem on the left and in progressive movements of having so many different groups. We create a new group every week. And I know with my peers and younger women, sometimes there's also kind of a distrust or pushback to organizations that have are established and have been around for a while. And I was wondering if maybe you could speak to negotiating that, how you're reaching out to younger women of color, and talking to them about how now is relevant to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just saw a question about unions which are regressive. I don't know if people know that we have a woman for the first time leading AFL-CIO, Liz Schuler, after Trumka passed away suddenly. And she already has made a difference. She has called out a union, some kind of union honcho in Delaware, state of Delaware, who said something racist or I don't know the details, but she publicly has said we need to have him resign, right, removed. And so immediately with representation, we are seeing that. So I just saw that question, so I wanted to point that out. I think there is some movement on that issue. In terms of engaging, having a multi-generational organization, everybody has something to offer. Somebody could have lived a lot of life in 20 years, and somebody could have lived nothing in 70 years, right? Had a very one-dimensional life. So we have to recognize that. So I think the way we do that is to recognize where people are in their lives. When you are in your, young 20s, you might have more time to be involved, but having followed through is something older folks can help you, mentor you into, right? It's because you're in a new world. I have a 21-year-old daughter, so I see this, excited about a lot of things. And then how do you have accountability of yourself being engaged in those spaces? That's something we find in organizing, that a lot of excitement and no follow through, right? And it's not only with young people, it's with all people, but how do you set up a strict structure of mentorship and accountability that allows you to have that excitement and understand that when you are at that point in your life, you are going to have lack of follow through on some issues. So that's when the rest of us need to pick it up instead of pointing out and saying, you're bad, you're not doing this, you just wanted to be in the march, but don't follow through. Let's see, how do we help you do the follow through? This is what it looks like. This is how you mentor. Same thing in the next phase of your life. A lot of people are getting into jobs, starting families, their time becomes very precious. So that's, again, when the older cohort of us need to step in and say, your heart is in the right place. You want to do these things. Your life is really full. Why don't we make sure we have like you have sharing of responsibilities in a job. Sometimes you time share in a job. You can do that in organizing, right? You set up relationships with people who can pick. And these are some practical solutions I'm telling you that we are trying to do so that we have everybody's voices and different levels of engagement based on where you are in your life. We have to just acknowledge that and say, it's just like saying, schools start at 7 a.m, make no sense because teenagers sleep late. So we just have to understand where we are, where each person is, look through their lens, and ask and invite people to participate and make sure they feel that power sharing actually has impact. So, and the impact is through whatever policy your organization is doing. Do you see yourself in that? Do you see yourself in what we just said as an organization that you brought to the table to talk about? And I think that tells people that is what inclusion looks like. You power share, you time share, and you make sure you value each other regardless of what experience you bring to the table. A lot of work to do. It's not easy. It sounds like, this is how you just do it. But it's hard work to organize and build movements, as you all know. That Amazon vote, yep. Amazon, that, I know that's a hyperbole, they make you pee in a bottle kind of thing. It's not hyperbole because I know this is happening. As I said, what is happening today in the world, it's happening. These things are happening and we have to take them for reality and really fight for these. So yeah, lots of work to do.
And kind of a follow-up to your remarks, at least from my personal experience, I've also found too that there's a real class disparity in activism. And very often the people who are the most active are the people who have the financial means to and the time to be most active. So I've been thinking a lot more lately about how do we, to your point and to your comments, change activism to allow people who are working class, for a better lack of putting it, to have the same spotlight and the same opportunity to become involved in that conversation. So is there any, what things are you guys doing it now to help facilitate that?
So we face those same problems, right? And it is about, so I remember we have a Domestic Workers Alliance, which is very active in Philadelphia, and there's a nationwide movement on that. And we have been, allies and supporting and testifying when they've come up in city council. So showing up in spaces where people are struggling or trying to have a voice. And for people who have the means, again, taking the back seat and giving the floor to someone whose lived experience can help shape a much better policy, and having your ego in check while you're doing it. And this is an ego, could be an organizational ego, could be a personal ego, but you really have to train yourselves and have that training of power sharing when you know that that person brings that lived experience that can shape the policy, but you have to carry it through and frame it maybe. And that's the power sharing you do with that person. I think it is about, we have a nonprofit infrastructure that addresses a lot of the needs for our government, but all of those are mostly white women led, So where is the pipeline being made for young people of color to come up through those? And those are the things, if I were to hand a contract to a nonprofit for some service, I would like to see their structure, their board structure, their executive structure, and their pipeline structure. Because, we're fighting a prison to, school to prison pipeline. We're fighting that, which means there are less people with less skills when you are poor, because you might have been imprisoned along the way. How do we take all that into account when we are, we are an organization that maybe does a service delivery. How do we look for that? So that is about looking at how you give people jobs. If you have a felony conviction, and if you are, it's a space that's okay for you to be there, how do you attract those things? Banning the box is good, but it doesn't go any place, because at the end of the day, the organization will ask about your criminal history, and then you don't get the job, right? Even though they didn't ask you along the interview process. So that kind of a policy without teeth is useless. So we have to really test the policies to see what's happening. And this is the accountability and transparency piece that becomes so important. This is why I wanted to be your Auditor General, is to be able to see what our dollars are doing, right? Because it's your dollars that are going out, and how effectively are they being used to address these inequalities? How effectively are we dismantling structures that stand in the way of making sure everybody has a fighting chance?
Jordy, I think, put a kind of question in the chat. He said, so with love, representation matters, but it can't be the end goal. I find there can be a dark side to progressive organizations replacing representation within organizations as an ingredient,
Yeah,
with the end.
yeah. So yeah, hi Jordy. So it can devolve into policing. Yes. So again, how do you create the safe space? And again, what's missing, Jordy, is the ego check. I don't know how else I can say this. We try to ignore that egos play a huge part in how power is maintained. And when we put that into the equation of our lens to say, what is actually holding us back? When you're interacting with people who might not have the same skill set as you, and that lived experience is what you're wanting to bring in, you have to impart some level of skill sets to people. So that's that mentoring pipeline that I was talking about. That how do we make sure that we are getting people up to speed? A lot of times you'll see people will put someone black or brown at the top of an organization. They fail and they say, see, we gave them a chance, they couldn't do it. And to avoid that, this performative way of addressing intersection, it's performative. We have to go much deeper to see what is in place to actually support and build the strength of the person we appointed. As I said about the woman who's leading now, she's in a place where she's feeling attacked from everywhere instead of supported and saying, okay, these are the leadership skills we need. What is missing? So I'm on their audit chair. I'm not a board member anyway. I just wanted to quickly change that. When I was running for office, I gave that up. So I am on their audit chair for the entire now, and I am the interim chair of Pennsylvania now. And I also am a part of Philadelphia now. We have different chapters. And the unique thing about now is we have very little supervision from National now outside of just following our core mission. We pretty much do whatever we want in any of these chapters. So there's no real hierarchy besides a few structural pieces about funding and all that. So Christian Nunez is her name. She is up against, her goal now needs to be creating a solidarity. And that comes if you put your game plan out, right? So this is what we're trying to achieve. And the game plan comes not just from her. It needs to come from a wide variety of a grassroots organization to come together, make the plan, see which parts of you belong to this part, this member, that member, bring them together and help her be a cooperative leadership. I think women, that's why I said women are the future. Women are better at power sharing. That's just been, observed. Not always, not when you're the only in a big organization and you want to maintain that only status, because it gives you some agency from being just the only, that we find in people of color. They don't want anybody else to come in because they like me. I figured this out. Now you're going to mess it up by two of us being there, right? So by ego, I don't mean just ego of white people. I mean ego of everybody. And acknowledging that there is that conundrum and we have to deal with it head on. Not talking about it, skirting it is not going to solve these issues. So yes, we cannot be performative, Jordy. We have to be real. And by real, we mean investing resources in building that leadership, building those folks who have different lived experiences and bring different things to the table that are critical.
So we're gonna end the live
Sorry.
stream on Facebook, but I did have like one or two more questions if you have time to stick around. The big one I wanted to ask you about is, as a woman who has run for office and a woman who has been in positions of authority in the advocacy sector, but also the business sector, the way in which women are called upon to comport themselves or the way in which their presentation is interpreted and some of the things that they have to deal with coming back at them is very, very different. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your personal experiences, but first, I forgot we have to let Hal do the close. So we're going to do that, and then I'll let you finish about that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I actually have to run off to FDR Park. We're doing a open air something that I'm participating in with the Cambodian American community. So I'll have just a few more minutes. So I'll wait till Hal is done and answer that question that you just asked.
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a really very, very interesting, informative discussion with Interim President Nina Ahmad from Pennsylvania Now, and I'm so glad I got to listen to it and be educated. Thank you all for watching on our live stream. If you want to continue, there'll be a few more moments with President Ahmad, Kristen, and maybe some of your questions as well on Zoom. So if you're on the Zoom, you can stay. Obviously, if you're on Facebook, then thank you. Have a great Labor Day weekend. And I will not do a chant, but I will just say again, when we organize, we win. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you, Ms. Ahmad, Kristen, and all.